What's up, Diablo 4 players? So let's hop right into it. What are the good uniques in Season 5 that have been updated that are actually worth your time investing into, whether that is picking it for a drop to actually use yourself, or actually saving it to maybe trade and sell it online on a Diablo trade website. So these are kind of the items to kind of look out for, and we're just going to be covering the ones for all of the classes. So let's go ahead and kick it off with the very first one. We'll go over quickly the updates, as there's a bunch of these items here. So first off, Azrath is actually a pretty viable thing. I want to say this is a very niche item. Unless you happen to have the lucky hit chance for the damage to roll absolutely godly, basically perfect, even then it never was really an item that a lot of people really liked. I still think it's a viable option. There is a build with it, but for the most part, this is kind of like a throwaway item unless you get a bunch of greater affixes, and even then, you would still have to find the right buyer for this. Next up, Banisher's Talisman. The newer update for this in Season 5 actually removed the crit. I almost feel like this item is worse. The legacy ones actually might go up in value as, well, it had core skills, which was already a good thing, and crit. Those are the main things that you'd want. Now, it does have technically max life, so it's more defensive, but Banisher's Talisman was mainly an offensive, and the only time it really saw a lot of play was when people would make one-shot builds around it, which you can still technically do, but the old one is just objectively better when you have crit. Now, there are some builds maybe you want more attack speed, but for the most part, the way it orients itself is a item that is based around crit. And they removed that. I don't know why they did that. This item is just kind of worse now. Speaking of worse, this item was originally going to be 100% the godliest item that ever came into Diablo. Unfortunately, it got nerfed in its stats in terms of how much bonus damage you would get. But on top of that, they made it so the resource cost was even worse. You could actually maybe mix this in with some crazy Banisher's Talisman build, but for the most part, Crown of Lucian doesn't really see any play. There are very, very few builds that can actually make use out of this. But nonetheless, if you happen to get a greater affix one, I don't think it's like a throwaway. So if you get like a greater affix on, let's say, that cooldown or a lucky hit chance, you can consider it maybe possible that in the future, once some sort of YouTuber or streamer makes like some build that makes use out of it, then the price will skyrocket if you have a god one. But I wouldn't throw this item away. It still has some potential if people figure out how to make it busted. Endurant Faith, this item is kind of just worthless. I'm gonna keep it real. No one's really using this to prevent one-shots because no one really looks at an item as like, I really want to survive. For the most part, on gloves, you really want offensive stats, so this is an item that I would say just skip. Now, finally, we're getting into some of the best items in the game. Fist of Fate. This is 100% a super S tier item. This is one of the best things that has actually came out in Season 5. An absolute must, though, is to try to get that lucky hit chance as a high roll. If we were to look at this on a greater affixed one over here, look at that. 139 lucky hit chance. There's nothing that competes with it. You get like 10 lucky hit chance on like a greater affix. If we were to take like another, like a ring or something, if you were to get a lucky hit chance on a perfect roll, it's 8.7. So to have this one over here be like 130 is just absolutely crazy. This is the first like god item that you can get, but it has to roll good. The problem is this item can roll either 1% lucky hit or 51. So the ranges are absolutely all over the place. So good luck getting a good one, but if you happen to get a good one, the lucky hit chance needs to be actually high. The rest of the stats don't matter as much, but the lucky hit chance to apply random crowd control, that is another great stat to look out for. So this is the first one that I would absolutely keep. Next up, there are a few new boots in the game that got buffed. Flicker Step actually got some buffs over here. For the most part, though, it is kind of difficult to make a build around it, even though it sounds cool that you can get like your ultimate being able to be spammed. The problem is that you still have to walk up and do this little like awkward movement. It's still like potentially an okay-ish item, but if you happen to get a greater affix ultimate damage, there are some builds that I'm thinking about that have some potential, specifically like Death Trap, which has a crazy like 150x multiplier that may see a little bit of play. But I wouldn't say this item is like a throwaway, but for the most part, there's only like a handful of people that will actually be interested in actually running this. But if you happen to get a greater affix ultimate damage one, that's the item that I would say is going to be able to make this have any value, is that specific stat, greater affix. The rest of the stats aren't really super important here. Next up, the Frostburn. Honestly, if you're running any lucky hit chance to deal damage, you're probably going to be running Fist of Fate. I feel like this item doesn't even need to exist. They should have gave it like attack speed plus a bunch of core skills and maybe even crit. And even then, there's going to be a bunch of people that would say, I don't really want to run it anyways. It does give you a bunch of fire and cold damage, which can help with the Sorc, but I would say this item is probably not going to be seeing some play. It could be a very, very niche one. If you happen to get like double greater affix on the lucky hit damage, then maybe someone out there could be interested in it, but for the most part, it's a skip. Godslayer, this is actually a pretty good item. At the end of the day, people will be running the Harlequin Crest as the best in slot, but this is still a decent item, specifically giving you an insane amount of damage. I mean, look at this thing, greater affix, 181 with masterworking. You get 15 cooldown reduction. It's also got all stats max life, and that's not even counting its special power to give you up to 60x multiplicative damage. That's actually a pretty decent thing to go for. So this item is going to be easily replaced by Harlequin for a majority of players, but still not a bad item. This item over here got basically destroyed. If you need to get crit strike transfer any build, getting up to 40% is higher than anything else, but the problem is the rest of the stats for the most part just went completely in the opposite direction. I almost feel like that all stats should have been like up to 30% all stats. Then people would maybe consider it, but like it's just so low. They just nerfed this thing way too hard. Then they're like, here's resistance to all elements. Like what? Like I don't even know why they did that. It was supposed to be a super offensive item, and then they were like, yeah, let's mix in some like 3% all stats. Like what is that number? This item, they basically destroyed it, man. Maybe next season or mid-season update you can look out for it, but basically this is garbage. This item has always been garbage. It's sad because it's like the super cool ring that you get when you defeat Lilith for the first time, but it still has never been good. It would need a lot more stats. If it said if a core skill just hit an enemy, it would restore, like not hits 4 or more, just hits an enemy, then we could finally make it see some play. I just don't know what the point of this item. Delete it. It's effectively worthless in the game. Even when you get it at the very end, it's kind of disappointing compared to the rest of the stuff in the game. Anyways, next up we have Pain Gorge. This is actually pretty good for the Bash Barbarian, so Barbarian can make use out of this, and there's a couple other builds if you want to try it, like some basic builds. Hey, this is a pretty decent item at the end of the day, giving you ranks to basic skills, great, cooldown reduction, really awesome stuff. I believe before it had crit, unfortunately I think that it got removed, but it's still a pretty decent item, 200 multiplier. Still a pretty solid item at the end of the day, but ideally you get like greater FX basic skills, so pretty solid item in Season 5. Next up, the Penitent Greaves. These were really cool in Season 0, and then it got phased out. The reason why is like you could then go ahead and get a aspect like Concussive Strikes or anything like that. It would just give you like a 20 multiplier, which made it like 15, where it used to be in terms of its damage, just outclassed. But then they buffed it up, and now we have Critical Strike against shield enemies. That's actually not too bad. You get a greater affix, rolls 9 crit, you can masterwork and get like 12, 13. It's not too bad for crit strike chance. It's kind of like, it almost reminds me of like an Esu's Boots over here, although that's better for Sorc, but not every class is Sorceress, so it's a pretty good offensive item. If you need to apply chilled or a crowd control effect that's guaranteed, especially if you're playing melee, it's kind of nice because you don't have to like get lucky hit. It's just automatically activated, and it's a 25x more damage. The rest of the stats on it aren't really that great though, but it's just crit strike chance is not something that you normally get on boots, so this is a pretty good item. Next up, this is like another god S tier item, the Rakanoth's Wake. These boots are incredibly good. They give you cooldown reduction, which you normally can't get, and resistance to all elements at a pretty high roll, and non-fizz damage. There's a lot of builds where like you can reach certain bonuses if you get X amount of some sort of like damage. Specifically on the sorceress, it helps out with some multipliers. But on top of that, for some other classes, if you don't have Tyrael's Might or you can't play it in your build because you are playing, let's say like Druid, and you need that specific chest piece for the Werebear or Werewolf, you also have the Rakanoth's Wake to go ahead and actually run, and it'll just fix all your resistances. And then on top of that, cooldown reduction normally doesn't roll on boots, so if you get like a greater affix one, you do some masterworking, but even like 15 cooldown reduction, that's a big number. That's a pretty solid item overall. This is probably one of the best boots that got added into the game. Then it's got a special power that actually may see some play in the super end game with certain abilities that can be refreshed, like let's say if you're making an ice build, like sort of an enchant sorceress, you can maybe consider this something to maybe look at in the future. I think this item has some more potential. So honestly, getting the greater affix on cooldown reduction is really good, or even the non-physical damage. But this is a pretty solid item that you may want to pick up. And then Soulbrand, this item's been bad since like the launch. I don't know what the point of this item is. The fact that the barrier only lasts 4 seconds. If it lasted until it went away or something, it actually maybe see some play, but there's nothing that you need to pop to really make this thing go off. It also doesn't work with one of the aspects that would give you a heal. There are a lot of weird things in the game where like the dodge actually counts as a potion being popped, but it doesn't count as a potion being popped for other aspects. But yeah, there's one where like if you would dodge, you would actually heal. The game registers it halfway as a potion. It's kind of a weird way that it registers, but basically this item, it's not really that great. The problem is that you get a good amount of damage reduction while you have a barrier, which is kind of cool, but there is maybe some cool things that you can do with like Rogue, because you can pop a potion to get more damage. So it lets you pop a potion at full life, but it's a little bit more interesting as far as like that part of the effect. But it would have been really cool if they said your potion popping effects would like, quadruple or something like that. But for the most part, like getting, HP damage reduction while healthy. That's not too bad, but potion capacity doesn't really, excite players. Barrier generation isn't really that bad of a stat, surprisingly, but overall, Tyrael's is just like the best in slot, so it just can't really see any play. Next up, another really godly item, Shard of Barathel. This is one of the best uniques that has been added into Season 5 with the most recent buffs that we got for a lot of basic builds. On top of that, this is giving you basic skills. This is a item that people will definitely want to buy. The main problem, though, is it rolls from 50% to 200%, so the chances of it rolling good are quite rare. And then on top of that, you also have like a big roll on the basic attack speed, and then you also have 1 to 2 basic skills, which is another great thing to roll. And some builds may want to have more maximum resource for more damage, but a really good item. Definitely hold on to this if you happen to get a good roll or trade it. Tasks of the Dawning Sky, it's been bad since the game came out with this item. It was a really interesting item to give you maximum resistance. I don't know why they decided Tyrael's just gets way more. I understand it's uber unique, but like this item just can't really see any play for the most part. It gives you movement speed, which is rare on a unique pair of pants, but other than that, it's just not really like useful. Like basically it's a skip. There's not enough good stats on this to make it viable, and on top of that, there's a special ability where you get like the extra damage reduction. I wish that's just stuck forever. I don't know what the point of the buff of this was, because it's pointless. Next up, to Bolts. This is been an item that got nerfed. They basically cut it in half, and a lot of players don't want to run it anymore. There are a few builds that can make use out of it though, but for the most part, a lot of people have just been enjoying tempering, and tempering sometimes can give you more damage. Heck, pants have utility slots, so you can get like concussive strikes, which is a 20x, and it applies a crowd control potentially. You don't have to have this some sort of condition. You do get a decent chunk of extra resource, but a lot of builds at this point just have infinite resource because Ring of the Star of the Sky solves that problem. But there isn't anything that makes this super like lucrative, other than maybe if you're playing a very specific build and you need that maximum resource for your build, like if you're playing like a Bone Spirit and you need to reach a certain breakpoint, then yeah, it could see some play. It's not a terrible item, but it just definitely lost out on its original identity, which is crazy damage on pants. Razor Play, it's still a good item. I haven't really seen anyone play Thorns, but guys, in Season 6, aka when the new Spiritborn class comes out, this will definitely be something to consider, as what it does is it just gives you a massive amount of Thorns. There's a newer build specifically for the newer Spiritborn class where you're going to be able to apply Thorns on every single hit. It's legitimately going to be game breaking if they do not change it, but they actually said in an interview the Spiritborn is going to be broken at launch, like it's going to be OP. So if this works, I would definitely hold on to ones that have a lot of greater affixes. Plus, the Thorns has a chance to deal 200x damage. I mean, imagine Thorns being added to every single one of your attacks, and then it applies a 200x multiplier. Yeah, you guys get what I'm saying here. This is going to be one of the most busted items in the game, so hold on to this if you happen to get multiple greater affixes or like really godly rolls, but it's kind of hard because it rolls 100 and 200. Next up, Temerity over here. They buffed it up to give you more of the barrier, but there's a lot of things that like are supposed to give you barrier because you're healing, but that simply don't work off of your passive tree. So this item, depending on the class, if you really need barrier for like, let's say conceded or any aspect that gives you bonus damage when you have barrier, it's not the worst thing in the game. I just wish that stats were better. It does give you max life, but I wish it would give you max percent life and then life. The healing received and the chance to heal, I mean, it's like okay-ish, but at the end of the day, it's not a bad item. Next up, X-Falls. Unfortunately, they removed the cooldown reduction, which is usually where it solves some play, but then they buffed the lucky hit chance to be really good. It's a 75% chance. The problem is there's a lot of channel dot skills and a lot of dot skills in general. They only proc off the first activation versus the whole channel of the skill, so it really loses out on a lot of value specifically for that reason, but it does give you lucky hit chance on the item. But at the end of the day, it depends on the build. I haven't really seen any newer like X-Fall builds, so this item is like okay as far as the update goes in Season 5. I would say it may see some play, but I wouldn't say it's like a godly hold on to it. Next up, Yen's Blessing. This is a pretty solid item overall. It gives you resistances, which is great, resource gen, which you normally can't roll, and then that ability to cast another one. Sometimes what happens with this though is if it's on a skill that is going to be like a buff that like lasts a duration, after you activate it, it immediately casting in the middle of when your other cooldown is still going off makes it almost worthless. Like if you activate Poison Imbue after you just activate Poison Imbue, you only get one more hit of the Poison Imbue versus letting the other ones kind of go on, especially when you have like plus extra poison imbuements or whatever class you're playing. If you're playing Barb, it shouts 2 times, then it's like well, it's like, if for some builds it works, like for the Dust Devil build, that would actually be pretty decent because you automatically get the shout, giving you extra cooldowns. It's actually not bad on Barb, but Rakdos is also a pretty cool thing on Barb because cooldown reduction is king for a lot of builds. Anyways, those are the items that I think are going to be good, as well as like kind of the newer updates to the uniques and what classes may be able to take advantage of them. But if there's anything else that you guys felt like I missed out on, definitely let me know down below. But if you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new here and want to be up to date on, kind of what are the good items in Season 5, we'll be covering the other ones. And if you guys want to check what Uber uniques are going to be good for this season, go ahead and check the pin. I just already uploaded a video, but I wanted to go ahead and make a dedicated video for all of the uniques in the game. Anyways, take care, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.